Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of this, part of the 40K Academy hosted by the ATWN. My name is Alex. Everyone knows me now, so I'm getting sick of being around, I think. But we do have better guests than me on here today, which is great. We have Damian and Jay as well. How you guys doing?
Doing well, thanks.
Good, mate. Good.
Awesome. So, look, really what we want to do is, have people that are competitively minded talking through, and obviously casually minded as well, talking about game experience, game sense, and what they've actually experienced traditionally, around Australia and the tabletop scene. So, obviously, you guys have been around for a little bit of time. Some of you getting, a lot more results, more recently than others. How's about we just do a quick line of introductions and we can go from there? Damien, do you want to start off?
Sure. Yeah, I've been playing 40K since I was in high school, but dropped it off for a fair while. Picked it up again back in 2016, but only really sort of started playing in tournaments actually Uprising last year. I think that was actually my first tournament, and a few RTTs and stuff like that. But yeah, just getting more experience in that sort of side of the hobby over the recent period.
Beauty. What about you, Jay?
So I this time last year knew 5 of the rules of 40K and had yet to put down a game.
None of them are charge phase because you played.
No, actually, no, it was because I started out on Grey Knights, but
okay, fair enough.
It's so Tower's my main faction, and in my first year of competitive play, I was able to get into the rank 2 seat for the faction in Australia and top 50 in the world, which was kind of unbelievable, honestly, given how competitive the scene is in New South Wales and some of the people I was going against. And got to finish up in the top 16 and get invited to Masters, which was, again, something that I didn't really expect going into it. But yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think it's, look, in my opinion, right, Australia, we are at the top competitively right now when comparing it to the world.
Well, we are world champions at the moment. That's just science. It's facts.
It is. So, it's 100% accurate right there. Looking at some of the things as well, we've been able to be lucky enough to have Australians play against the scene, globally as well. And we've always come up on top. So fair to say that the scene here is booming. It's strong. So maybe we're slightly okay at giving some advice on 40K. And we'll see how we go from there. But not to detract from some of your accolades, Jay, but Damien, you definitely sold yourself a little bit short, right? I mean, the last 2 major events that you've gone to, you've come second place. You went undefeated most recently, and then also your only loss was to, Liam Hackett. Let's be honest. That's that's not an anomaly by any measure. The guy I played with him actually at a teams event this weekend, and he's an absolute machine. I think he dropped 2 points the whole game.
Yeah, he's an incredible player.
Yeah, he knows what he's doing. He's worked out the whole game before he even starts. So props to that. So you're doing amazing. I've had a lot of people wanting to speak to you as well on this, and Jay, it's amazing having you here as well with your competitive mindset. And you want to quickly plug your channel, maybe, because you do a fair bit.
Yeah. So I have a YouTube channel that I started like 3 months ago, kind of at the peer pressure of other people that I knew. And it's been doing really, really well. We focus on everything that's competitive. Tau, I stay away from a lot of the general stuff, like, what abilities are and all that sort of thing. And it's really about how to pilot the army in a way that brings in results, or just kind of takes a faction where, and Alex, you would know a lot about this from being on AdMech, where there are massive swings between the low end of players and the high end of players in terms of win rate and success with the army, and just sort of like showing people some of the things that I've been able to pick up just because I kind of lucked into one of the best teams in Australia just off my LGS. And yeah, it's really exciting. We're actually 10 subs away from 1,000 subscribers. So in 3 months of a channel, that's I'm pretty stoked. So it's Pantheon Studios Australia. So yeah, I don't know if there's if I could chuck links in chat or whatever else. So yeah, just search us. You'll find us. There's a look for the multicolored Mjolnir.
That's it. And yeah, what a great segue now for us to talk about, us as a whole and our factions, what we played. All 3 of us went to the Dice Arcade GT. All three of us played 3 different factions. All of us had vastly, similar but different experiences as well. Fair to say that the event itself was probably one of the more competitive events I've seen in a while, despite some of the regular competitive crew not directly being there. So, I mean, look, let's just go into it. It was a 80-player GT. It was held in Gaimea. If you've fan of the channel, you would have heard us speak about it and give some breakdowns before. But let's just start it off with the round table by just asking how everyone felt about the event. Anyone want to start?
Sure, I'll say, like, I think props to the organisers. Like, making an event of 80 players, 40k is not an easy feat. And really the whole thing went off really smoothly. And I thought it was a good event. Like, it was a bit different to some of the others, what's generally expected from competitive 40k events. And I think that's, depending on, regardless of what you feel about it, like, it's good to have things that are not just like a cookie cutter approach to competitive events, that actually there's things that favor different styles of armies and sort of throw up new challenges. And yeah, thought it was a great weekend.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think it's a good way to kind of shock the system at times. We're testing out 2 different things, right? We're testing out the environment of, kind of more unique terrain sets. And by the way, they did awesome with having the sheets there readily available for everyone. That was really good. But then also testing out arcs, right? This is the first big GT that we had in New South Wales, testing out Arcs of Omen. So it's really cool to see, and really, I think it really showed how prominent Dark Angels could be. They had an 82.5% win rate over the weekend. So that was pretty insane. Obviously, partially due to yourself, Damian. Josh Hines did really good as well with only 1 loss, and I think it was by 2 points. So, oh no, sorry, he got decimated by Guard in round 4. So the poor guy, but I guess that could have happened to anyone. But Jay, what do you think about the event?
No, I don't know if there's too much more that I can really add, because I agree with everything that was said. I have a really good rapport with a lot of the Dice Arcade guys, the Big Dice Energy fellas. I had a game against one of them, Jordan Peterson, who's always just like, it's just such a fun game because it's very, very amicable. He's obviously very good at his army, but there's none of the there's none of the stuff where people can get into habits of trying to creep for every little advantage and just try and make it feel like a slog. It actually felt like a very fun but competitive game, which is always really, really nice. And on your point of the sheets with the terrain layout and everything else, that is something that I would not be against becoming a sort of a standard for every single event, because there is nothing worse than having disagreements on what different terrains should have in terms of keywords and setups and everything else. Because as you were saying, sorry, I think it was Damian was saying, there are different things that armies want in terms of the table, the layout, the terrain that they have, the keywords they have access to. And, let's face it, the community can be a mixed bag of people because they're human beings at the end of the day. And if you can get rid of some of the cases of where, somebody pushes for something that they really want, but maybe that everybody else in the tournament isn't playing with or whatever else, then I think that is actually a good step up. And it's something that removes a potential, detriment from the social contract side of the game.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, setting up the new standard for that will be amazing. I jumped in to help last minute after lift sub. So that was, I'm happy to invest my time to do it. And I think, there's definitely ways that everyone else can do it. I believe that our next major GT as well, which is going to be down on the 40k GT held in Medallion on April 1st. I believe they already have their own map packs as well set up. Nice. So the standard is basically set. It's really nice to see New South Wales kind of paving the way with that and being able to push that to create that standard. And if we can keep that going, that's going to be amazing. So props to the guys. Dice Arcade there. So we're talking about Tim, Eugene, and Josh. They did a great job. So yeah, can't say more than that, right? How do you guys feel you went at the event? I mean, maybe let's talk through some of the results and findings that we had. Who wants to start with that? Do you want to go, Damian? You had a pretty cracker result.
Yeah, probably, best result I've had at a GT. Yeah, it was good. There were a few games throughout the weekend that were pretty close, like pretty nail biters. Had some pretty strong opponents through it. So Josh Brody That was a really tight game. Came down to 2 points. Played against Igor's Necrons in the final round as well. But yeah, all good opponents. Sort of, I was really happy with that. And like, obviously, it's no secret that Dark Angel's got a big boost with Arcs of Omen, and gone from like one of the worst performing factions to one of the best. So it's good, I suppose, for a player who doesn't like. I've only had Dark Angels, and I'm not a kind of player who will go from army to army. Really, like that's kind of my passion, army. And it's nice sometimes when you've had the reps, like in a difficult circumstance, that then you get a bit of a boost, and it sort of opens up sort of some space for you in the competitive scene. So, keen to sort of get in a few more sort of soon. But yeah.
And not to detract, I mean, I think we first met playing a league game in dingy GW, well, not GW.
It was Good Games Town Hall.
Good Games Town Hall.
Unair-conditioned back room.
Yeah, and trying to find the best terrain we could find to get it going. But I'm pretty sure you won that game.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, not to detract you, you were getting results before the event as well. I think you didn't play a lot of major events back then, but now that you're getting into the swing of things, I think it's more or less like you're just in that environment, and yeah, it shows. You know what you're playing. You know how to play the army. If you didn't know how to play the army, and you just jumped on Dark Angels, you wouldn't have gotten undefeated at the event. So props to you, man, and really well done.
Thanks.
Jay, how did you feel about the event?
So I had a less smooth run. I ended up going 3-2, but realistically probably should have been 4-1. And the
last
reason
game was pretty memey. It was pretty funny.
The last game was pretty memey, and that's why, like, I don't even really count that one. Like, that was the one loss that I'm happy to just take, because that one, going into Chris O'Neill, who's a good friend of mine, and sort of towards the end, we were like, hey, man, we're not going to podium. Let's just have a laugh, throw some dice. We have this running joke that because we have a perfect 50% win rate against each other, and I had the last win, so I was like, shit, man, it's your turn to win, so this game's only going to go one way. And, like, you know, obviously we still played a competitive game, but Custodes just 4-upped the hell out of me. And, I got turn 1, threw everything into him, and he should have died massively because he was just standing all in the open against a Tau gun line with first turn Montcar. But just the number of 5s and 6s he threw, I think, like, Afghanistan didn't give me PTSD, but I'm pretty sure his Imperial dice will.
Yeah, fair enough.
So yeah, but the loss that I'm sort of referring to more was actually in the first round, where we got sort of towards the end of the game, and because there was a model in my army I hadn't been using a ton, and I was unfamiliar with, and we were sort of running out of time, so we're just kind of like belting out different things. I forgot an ability, and my opponent was being an absolute gentleman about it. He's like, look, you've been fine through the entire game. I feel it's an honest mistake. Got to the end, and I found out I was going to win by 7 points, and I retracted my win and said, hey, man, I'm not okay with this. I know that there could have been a swing, and I won't walk away with the victory unless I feel I've 100% earned it. Does it like, and he pushed back a couple of times, but that's something that I am actually very hard on myself on. Doesn't matter if anybody else is. I know that I should be better than that. And so I was more than happy to take that. And that actually, like, I still felt guilty for the rest of the day, but at least it, was better than the other side of it.
Well, do you want to give a shout out to the player that you played against?
Yeah. It was the Salamanders player, Todd. I don't think I know his last name.
No, Todd. He's actually now part of Knobs. So Chris just.
Okay. Yeah. Well, like, honestly, the whole game against him was just so good. Like, he obviously knew his army well. He played it well. He made good decisions. And he was a gentleman to play, which, Alex, my tumultuous first year, when I go against an opponent that I walk away from, win or loss, being like, you were a fantastic person, that for me is kind of a win in itself.
That's it, man.
Yeah.
It's always, look, it's good to have enriching experiences in 40K. That's the main thing that we want. We don't want to walk away and feel salty or then feel like we have to keep talking about other things and complaining. It's not a hobby. It's it's a detriment to us.
Well, for me, 40K has kind of filled a little bit of a role in my life where, like, I can't really play like rugby union or anything anymore. I can't do some of the things I did in my teenage and early 20s where I was doing Muay Thai and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and all that sort of stuff. And so it sort of fits that sort of team sports environment. Even though you're doing it on your own, I'm seeing a lot of the same people. I'm wanting to, like have those moments where you go up and chat to people about their games and laugh and meme and whatever else. And it's that for me is more what it's about. Like if I lose a game on the table, who gives a shit? Like I don't tie my self-worth to what I do at a tournament or whatever. So that's kind of the bigger thing that I take from everything.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think it goes without saying, we played in Masters, and that was a pretty rough game, but you were an absolute gentleman throughout it, right?
I've never been fisted like that. Seriously, like I've had some wild weekends, but you took the cake.
Amazing. Well, let's segue. I don't know how to segue that one, but speaking of taking cake,
you'll find a way. No. You'll find a way.
Let's go into maybe self-reflections on the list and talk about review our list, maybe quickly talk about what we brought and see what you think we would be making changes to and tweaking. I can probably start if you guys want to get your own list up, because I'm terrible at remembering my own list, but luckily I remember this one. I brought an oops all chickens list. It did well. It did surprisingly well. The actual melee potential in the army that I brought for AdMech is absolutely bonkers for a shooting army. So 70% of my output was probably melee. Dragoons, more importantly, when you're running 2 units of 3, there's such a big base that if there's a sentinel or if there's even 5-man units around, you can actually charge with one model, kill 3 to 4, then wrap them with 3 big boys. And even if they're an 80 mil base, they actually can't get out. So your dragoons just get value. They kill something next turn in the opponent's turn, and then they just keep moving. And they're a 10-inch move. The following turn, they're probably a 13-inch move with a 3d6 charge, and they just get into your back line by turn 2. And then that's 2 lots of 18 wound bodies that are T6, neg1 to wound, 3 up save, 5 up involved that you have to deal with, which is just absolutely ridiculous. So I think they were absolutely a great hit. They did more than my shooting did by far. Something that I'm definitely changing is obviously the Dune Crawler, because that was absolute trash. It was to the point where I started frontlining it in my games and using it for charges. And this is the shooting army, shooting model. I would advance at turn 1, so I'd move 10 inches, 8 inches, then advance. The people would question why I'm doing that, because then I couldn't shoot its main gun, and I'd shoot only 8 stubber shots. Then the following turn, I'd 11-inch move it and 3d6 charge it into something and move block. That was the biggest value I could find from that terrible unit. So definitely know what I'm going to be changing. And changing that to 2 units of troops means that I get access to banners. So now I'm thinking better with secondaries and not being a complete dutz. The only reason I won the event was because 4 out of 5 of my opponents had me able to pick another secondary of AdMechs that's very, very niche. So don't want to have to rely on that in any other GT whatsoever. See you later, Dune Crawler. You will not be missed. And yeah, that's that. But what about you, Jay? You want to start off next?
Sure, yeah. So I actually brought Hayden Walduck's list from Uprising. And actually I'm going to be interviewing him on Friday, which is going to be my birthday. So having a little bit of a birthday interview sort of thing with him. And yeah, so I found that I've always liked the Fisher Fury lists. So I was running the for people that don't know what was in his, the Enforcer Commander with triple cyclic ion blasters and the Thermo with reroll all hits and wounds, a Cold Star with a Warlord trait that we haven't really seen all that much, where all of your weapons get an additional -1 AP, and had him rock and on 6s to wound you do mortals, capped at 3 per phase. With him having 2 of the burst cannons, one of the ones that ignores wound caps and all that sort of stuff, and 2 flamers, he goes from having meh kind of weapons to having AP2 burst cannons, which is 18 shots, and 2 AP1 flamers, which Tau really doesn't have outside of the thermoneutronic. And then Fisher Fury, Pathfinder's laid out with a bunch of rail rifles, hammerheads, and double riptide. I found that through my games, I was still able to alpha strike all the usual people that we'd be able to. And one of the ways that we really do win games easily, where we're not having to, claw for every single point that we go for, is by removing these massive threats that can stop us from being able to affect our game plan. And I know that can be something for a lot of people, but for Tau, it's particularly stark because a lot of our secondaries are geared around that. And because we're just an all-shooting army, when you lose models, you're losing an enormous amount of damage from just one phase. You can't really fall back on fight phase. You don't have psychic phase. You don't have whatever else. So losing resources really hurts like that. One of the things that I'm actually thinking of running, especially post data slate, like from you saying this was the first Arcs of Omen going that we had at a GT level in Australia, is our crisis suit's got a 5. Oh, sorry, in New South Wales. Sorry, yeah. Our crisis suit's got a 5-point nerf. Now, it doesn't sound like much from the outset, but the crisis suits have been basically nerfed every single data slate that has come out, including weapon options and, these really secondary nerfs that you have even if the base model isn't touched. And so that extra 5 points meant that a standard unit that's conservatively equipped was looking at 425 to 450 points before you chuck drones on it. Now it's looking at 475 to 500, depending on what you're chucking on it. And putting a quarter of your army into these suits can work, but it makes that exacerbating problem of losing resources when you need them to go and step on objectives and whatever else. But I am keen to see how they're going to go in the Arcs of Omen world, because, we're seeing people put up results with crisis suit-based lists. I really despise the Riptides, and it's not because the Riptides are strictly bad, but it's just that they're not consistent. And I find that I like having consistency in my list where I can look at something and kind of know what it's going to do throughout a phase. With vertically stacked crisis suits, you can kind of do that. Whereas with Riptides, I may throw the 6 dice for the ion cannon and just look at a bunch of 1s, 2s, and 3s and be like, cool, I'll just head out back and grab a beer. You just take the board and do whatever you want and just let me know how dead I am by the time the turn's done.
It is swingy. I feel like, GW's probably just missed the mark with Tau. The internal balance, I think, is pretty scuffed, but I think realistically, the only reason that, Crisis is so oppressive is due to the fire and fade mechanic. You could make that once per game, but then make Crisis suits, 10 points cheaper, and it would be so much more fixed,
I think,
because then you could run more Crisis as well.
I would actually tend to disagree. I don't think fire and fade is actually the problem. I think that the main problem with Tau as a faction is that our win rate is as swingy as our ability to demolish or be demolished depending on your opponent. Like, if we have people that don't particularly understand terrain rules and deployment and everything else, it is not uncommon for me to pick up 1,500 points of somebody's army in the first, if they give me the opening to do it. And when you're on the receiving end of it, that feels horrible. That is one of the most terrible experiences that I can think of putting on, especially to a new player. Like, you have somebody that shows up at a league or whatever else, it's their first outing, and they have a Tau player do that to them. And not everybody's going to be a gentleman like you were and be very gracious in victory and, kind of have a bit of empathy for what the person's feeling on the other side of it. There are plenty of people that laud the ability to do that to somebody, and it feels horrible. And so I think that is probably the bigger thing. Oh, Alex, I
think some people are looking at it like, that's it. They're just like, all right, so you lose.
Yeah. But that's where I think their major thing is. I think the fire and fade, if you were to do that, I think that would actually be kind of a final nail in Crisis Coffin. Not strictly and not as dramatic as that, but I think it would drive down their value massively, because that's one of the only things that allows a Crisis unit to get their value over a game at a, quarter of your army price point and, be able to do effective damage and live to turn 5 with, our options being Montkar or Kao Yun. If you're not living to turn 3, 4, and 5, you are getting 0 value out of that entire part of your book.
I've seen some people actually starting to playtest and actually bring the Sunshark Bombers back. But
I would love to. I've thought about that, yeah. Because at the end of the day, like, Sunshark Bombers, for me, everybody worries about the bomb, but I actually got more out of their shooting than I did out of their bombing. The bombing was just something that forced your opponent to deploy around it, think about it, and potentially cause, a forced error, but just something from its existence.
Yeah.
Even when it came off on Deep Strike, it coming on with, 12 SIB shots, essentially, missile pods, and then Seeker missiles, as well as bringing its own Markalite support. Really good.
That's the thing that is often like really powerful about that, is like not so much what its output is, but does it disrupt your opponent's game plan?
And actually, I had on a video that I put out recently talking about taking a ghost kill, which is, you know, kind of our meme unit at the moment. But people are diehard for it. And,
That's
you know,
such a cool
taking it
model.
as a 66% win rate, which is a meme in itself. And I had the flamers on there, and I had somebody put in a comment like, no, you should be doing burst cannons, you should do this. And I said, you know, respectfully disagree. The flamers on a unit that is the only ore specs that we have in the game, and then as a unit that I can use as just this big, like 12 inches, you don't want to come in here, and if you charge me, I'm going to have auto hitting flamers. That as a decision-making process, especially when you're at the high end, like casual players, it may not matter. But when you're at the high end, being able to dictate your opponent's decision-making is sometimes how you win a game. It's not about dice rolls. It's not about whatever else. It is about the things that you can make your opponent do, even if they don't know that's why they're making those choices.
Totally. And, you know, not to derail this, because I think all the tower information is like really handy. If anyone does want to listen to more of this as well, you know, Jay does have his channel, so Pantheon Studios. So if you do want to check it out, please do. Jay's actually always very active as well in the comments. So if you do have any questions, you can then post them into the channel. That will obviously give him a big help out as well, and he'll be more than happy to help assist. So
absolutely,
yeah, great breakdown there. Now, speaking of the guy that's actually blowing up the chat on Twitch, you know, apparently, you know, you're known as people's missus' favorite 40k player, according to Twitch. So apparently the Whiters love you, Damian. Just letting you know that. But how, you know, self-reflection on your list, is there anything that you're changing, anything that you really like that you want to keep? How are you feeling?
Do you want to run through my list first? Or...
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so it's a mixed Deathwing and Ravenwing Dark Angels list, with a fairly heavy emphasis on the Terminators and attack bikes. So yeah, 2 big bricks of Deathwing Terminators, you know, dressed to the nines, got all their Thunder Hammers and Storm Shields, Cyclone missile launchers. I run like a few characters to improve their durability a bit. So the Pennant of Remembrance to give -1 damage, Lazarus to protect against mortal wound output, which was pretty important in a couple of games that I played. But then apart from that, it's all heavy weapons. So one of the big things for Dark Angels, why they become so competitive, is Codex Warfare. So your list really needs to be written around how you're going to pick up heavy weapon kills throughout the. I mean, you don't actually need that many of them. You need like 7.5 kills, but like to max that out. But you've got to try and consistently get kills with those things. So your Talamaster, 9 attack bikes with multi-melters, Samael to run around to buff them, and this time was tweaked it a little bit from Uprising by adding in a land speed of Vengeance by dropping a couple of Terminators. Obviously, it went well. A couple of things I thought like I might try, like I can't remember his name because I didn't actually play him, but the other Dark Angels player who came who did quite well. That's right. Thanks. His list. One of the things that's a big challenge, I think, for Dark Angels players is the mirror match. And I was shit scared of going into his list like towards the end of the tournament, because he had a lot more shooting than I did. And that's the biggest tip for taking on this kind of list. If you take out the heavy weapons, then the Terminators might live to the end of the game, but they're not going to score that much by themselves. So I might try experimenting a bit sort of next time around with either some more Vengeances chucked in there, or some of the Storm Speeder Thunder Strikes. Yeah.
I mean, look, they're really consistent with damage, those guys. BS2 is just amazing right now in the game.
Exactly. So, I mean, I think it's a bit of a trade-off, because I mean, the attack bikes are good because they've got core, and you take the characters to give yourself rerolls, get yourself like, yeah, you're going to be advancing, hitting on 4s with them, but you're going to chapter master them. That gives them good reliability. But if something's ballistic skill 2, even if they're -1 to hit, they're still hitting on 3s. That's pretty reliable. So that's something I want to experiment a bit. And they're also a bit more independent and mobile, I think, with the fly keyword. So yeah, I do want to experiment a bit, like maybe dropping some of the characters, getting a few more guns in there, sort of buffing the Ravenwing side of it a little bit more. Yeah.
Makes sense. Look, I mean, yeah, props to Josh. He did really well as well, and fair enough for your worry, because at the end of the day, and at the end of day one, you were both undefeated, both very similar in points, I believe, and it really just came down to the pairings of round 4 that changed things. I felt really blessed that I went into Orcs, because that's a matchup that I feel my army does really well into, and it just worked out well. He came to me, and somehow I have better melee than Orcs in my list. So there you go. A bit nuts.
Likewise,
But,
start of day 2, I paired into Matt Lane's Drakari,
yep.
which, and we know each other, and that was a great game. But also, it was like, great, here's my shooting gallery. I'm going to just like try and line up. I mean, he did wipe out pretty much every Raven Wing model in my army by the end of the game, but yeah, it was a
Just
good
a bit
matchup.
too late. Yeah,
Yeah.
and look, Matt Lane is probably one of my favorite 40k players out there. And fun fact, he's also Ben Brown's doppelganger. So if anyone knows them, it's 100% true. I wish I had the photo now on my PC so I could actually put that as my background for both of them. You wouldn't know which one's which. So I remember I posted in the Discord for Ben Brown's birthday, and I said happy birthday, shout out, everything like that, and then I put up a photo of Matt Lane just cropped, instead of Ben Brown. I cropped Ben Brown out of it, and he hated it, which is great. So good fun. Look, fair to say, Jay, you already kind of touched on this in your answer before, where you kind of feel your army sits and some of the issues with it. So obviously, against new players, you can really kind of there's a lot of feel bad moments, when associated with Tau. But if there's a player that really knows how to play against them, the win rate for Tau can be actually quite shocking. So it really comes down to luck. The Riptides as well being very swingy obviously comes down to luck as well. So I completely understand those sides of it there. But Damian, how do you feel your army sits right now in the meta? I think I know the answer, but good to hear your thoughts.
Pretty good. And not just like in Australia. Like I've seen like Cherokee GT just happened, and Dark Angels won that in the US. There's 2 competitive lists I think running around. One is the mixed wing style, and the other one is just all Terminators, which got a massive boost because now with all the free war gear, you can almost get almost 50 Terminators into a list, which might struggle against. Yeah, it's pretty gross. But can just kind of flood the board and sort of win games consistently. I think the Raven Wing, Deathwing one's a bit more interesting, which is why I want to play that. Because you have like, maybe it's a bit more sort of robust into different styles of lists. So yeah, I think sort of that the fact that sort of you've got quite significant amounts of shooting in it that's highly mobile. So get around, get angles on things, get around sort of terrain, but also you've got the melee threat with your Terminators to go and take the board. And obviously sort of like pretty reliable secondaries. So throughout the weekend, Codex Warfare was every single game. Oath at the moment, depending on the map, is now pretty consistent again. And occasion, Stubborn Defiance is the Dark Angels one, which is a bit of a gamble. It's not actually as safe as people make it out because you don't have the points really to sort of occupy it with your expensive units. But if your opponent can't get to that unit of infiltrators that's sitting at the back, then it's a pretty sort of safe 15 points. Yeah.
Do you think there's a world where Green Wing comes back competitively?
No, not at the moment.
Yeah.
I think sort of like, it's the problem is that sort of the changes to Space Marines, I mean, generally amongst different factions, the ones that have Devastator Doctrine have been the ones that are shot to the top. And the Raven Wing, the fact that Dark Angels have a bonus in every single doctrine for different styles meant that they were able to benefit. And the Raven Wing one is probably one of the strongest. The Green Wing just kind of, they're just a bit too generic, and they don't really have. I mean, it doesn't really play into what is the unique things about Dark Angels, whether you've got like really tough Terminators or like super fast, quite tough Raven Wing as well. Like the Invul against shooting is very handy for like otherwise would be very soft units. But I do really regret it. I wish that they would do something for them because Dark Angels Plasma is pretty awesome. But yeah, they just haven't written the rules for it.
No, that's it. And obviously, you know, as everyone knows, there's four main ones. You know, with Dark Angels, there's Ravenwing, Deathwing, Greenwing, and what I played, Chicken Wing, using all the walkers and everything there, and also the chicken-legged Rusties. But yeah, I mean, I guess for you guys, what I'd love to hear is, firstly, and this is something that I haven't actually prepped you guys on, so apologies, but let's just say, Jay, firstly, how do we counter Tau? What are the armies right now that are the ones that actually should be the ones to watch against your faction?
A lot of the things that are going to do very, very well against Tau are the things with speed. If you can get into us, if you can stop us from either safely sitting in a castle and just kind of picking off what we need to until we're ready to explode out onto the board, or you've got an army that does very, very well with just touching us when we don't want you to touch us. And this is something that you did at Masters, where you were touching my back castle turn one. And it was something where I needed to screen better with, you know, my Kroot hounds and whatever else. But inexperience against your army really sort of like played myself in that one. And, you know, we were having a chat about it afterwards and reviewing and whatever. And, you know, both of us were like, yeah, if there's a Kroot hound unit just standing right here, then that whole game changes. Maybe it's still not a win for me, but at the very least, it's not a demolition. Yeah. And it comes down to more decision making rather than, cool, you can't see me from the other side of this wall, sit there for 3 turns and do nothing, and I get primary and you literally can't catch up, which is really how you beat Tau. What I was talking about before is probably the best way for people to think in terms of, when Tau lose critical resources, we lose the ability to win the game. Because a lot of the time we are winning the game through damage. We're not winning the game because we stand on a point we're unshiftable. We're not winning the game because we've just got a billion things in your deployment zone and you can't deal with us. Like, Fisher Fury list can do that, but a lot of people freak out over, like, hammerheads, for example. Not a single Tau player has won a game because of hammerheads. They have won a game because multiple hammerheads have been able to take out anti-tank and then just dominate the back line and stand out in the open and go, cool, I'm just going to, you know, have whatever I want. Left. Yeah. But if somebody's got the decision between taking out a hammerhead and taking out a devilfish with my breaches in it, they need to take out that devilfish every single damn time. The hammerhead may hit, it may not. But those breaches, if they've got a mobile unit that can push them up the board, get them to places that they shouldn't be able to see, stand on the point and give me my very limited obsec, that is the tactical decision you should be making to beat us. It's the same for Kroot. It's the same for, in certain areas, Kroot hounds, if we're not just using them for cheap screens or whatever. But yeah, you beat Tau by locking up their resources and stopping them from playing the way that they want to play and being safe.
Yeah, definitely. And I think at the end of the day, we can all agree on one thing. For Kroot again.
Oh, yes. We need Kroot back in the meta. We need Krootox Riders. We need the big ass, what's it called? The Narlock, the greater Narlock.
That would be amazing.
Give me a big ass dinosaur with a whole bunch of Kroot riding the back of it. I will literally put myself into debt for you.
So, I mean, I basically ran that where I had, I think it was like 200 and something Kroot. You're there. Man. This is back in 8th, and you could run Gala's Sept, and back then it actually gave you the ability to do the whole Tau Overwatch with everything for the greater good. Yeah. So you could do that with all your Kroot. Now, Baggage Harness, the great thing about Baggage Harness on the Krootox is that it gives you exploding hits in any point in time in the game. It's not just shooting phase limited. So you would have 200 Kroot, which is rapid fire, so 400 shots with exploding hits and also rerolls.
Yeah.
And
disgusting.
I love it. You know, Kroot meta. You know, why aren't people playing them? But anyway.
Actually, funny story for everybody. I literally couldn't buy Kroot when I was getting into this army because Alex bought every single Kroot unit in Australia, and that is not an exaggeration. I literally couldn't buy them because one person bought them all.
Some people like to watch a world burn. I bought like 180 extra Kroot just for fun. It was just a meme. So yeah, it was pretty funny. I mean, it's not good to my wallet, but it was also pretty hilarious when I started posting that everywhere. They were like, "Hey, we just got 20 boxes of Kroot back in stock," and I just sent a photo. No, you don't. And I just paid for it while drunk. You know, it was like 1 a.m. Out on the town, out on the way, like on the train home. So
it literally makes me feel nauseous. I've had to be so like conservative with how I collect this army and get it to a competitive point, and you just I need to not talk to you for like 5 minutes. Like,
Damian, what are some of the factions to watch that you feel are a threat to Dark Angels?
Well, shout out to Greg, who I did a practice match actually the other day. Yanari, a nut that I haven't been able to crack yet. So anything that can disrupt the Raven Wing aspect of the army, I think, is pretty challenging.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've got something that's like, well, that last unit that cheap unit that's hanging out there that you're trying to get a cheap 2 points for Codex Warfare on is going to turn into the Yinkan and it's going to come and wreck all of your attack bikes in the next turn. That puts a lot of brakes on the way I play it. But there's also, I mean, it's kind of, the army's a bit limited because a lot of that Raven Wing shooting is only 24-inch range. So I can get to anything with the range of the bikes and the range of their guns, but there's a lot of armies that can reliably make up 24 inches in combat. And I think that's kind of often a big challenge. Would want to play the game against Matt again because I think on slightly different terrain it'd be a lot more competitive game because his army can more than cross that distance. Once you take out the shooting, the Terminators might be difficult, but you're going to have control of the board, and it's still a very elite army. So, like what we're saying about the Tower armies, like every time you lose things, that's actually like costing you quite a lot of your like game plan. I think some of the competitive demons lists are a challenge because, well, Tzeentch demons 3-up unmodifiable saves hurts a lot against multi-melters and all of your shooting. And the mirror match obviously is like pretty challenging. Doesn't help people who aren't Dark Angels players, but I did actually play against Hayden at Uprising, so that list was that was our second last game, and that was it was down to the wire. But that's pretty challenging as well because, like, I mean, all that long range shooting that can very easily pick up all of like the Dark Angels output is kind of challenging. But that's where I like the mix kind of thing because, okay, they're going to try and aim to get rid of your Raven Wing, gives you some time. Deathwing is still pretty slow, but once they get into your lines, like they can do a lot of damage and be very hard to shift.
Yeah.
So.
I completely agree. And, let's give a shout out to Greg as well, because he has been playing Yanari for quite some time. So I think in general, he's a tough cookie to crack when he plays Yanari. I think he's actually testing out a few other factions right now, though, right? He's just looking around with some different things.
He's playing Death Guard at the moment.
Good man. Love it. That's a challenge. So yeah, props to him for that one. So I think let's round out with the last bit here, guys. What are some of the main tips you feel people playing your army should actually know? So, Jay, do you want to start? And obviously, disclaimer: too long, don't read. Go to his YouTube page. I think he talks about this a lot. So obviously, feel bad that you have to repeat yourself. But if there are the main tips, what would you say?
Main tips. I would probably say that. Okay, if I'm doing this through the lens of somebody who is trying to strictly be as competitive as possible, they're wanting to win RTTs and GTs and whatever else, it's good to play the models that you love, but there is a reason why most tower lists will center around a backbone and why certain units are left out. And it doesn't mean that they're bad, it just means that they're outshone by other things because in an army that operates in 2 phases of the game, we need to have very specific things that form a very specific role, and they need to do that well. If we can't do that, we can't win games. Our secondaries aren't passive. They're not something that we can just not interact with our opponent and still score massive amounts like Necrons, Sisters, Knights, all that sort of stuff. So everything needs to fit a piece. So when you're looking at that for casual games or whatever, play whatever you're wanting. But if you've got a good core backbone of your army, that is probably the best starting point. And I guess the other thing is that focus more on your movement phase than your shooting phase. Shooting phase is good, damage is good, but I have seen more tower players fall apart in the deployment and the movement phase. And I take longer in my movement phase than I do in my shooting phase. Because if we mess that up, you have lost the game before anybody rolls a dice. And that is probably the thing for a lot of people that are wanting to go from a, a casual or a lower end competitive player, and they're wondering why people are consistently winning games, when you can talk to anybody in a tournament and they'll tell you about all the dice rolls that went wrong. And you talk to any decent player and they will let you know why all of those dice rolls were irrelevant. Because if you're standing in the right places, if you're doing the right things, if you're staging well and planning ahead well, you are going to win games with or without swings of a dice. And yes, sometimes you'll get unlucky, and nobody's saying that that's not the case. But most of the time, and I spoke about this with why I love Crisis over Riptides, consistency. If I know the outcome of something generally, that is always better than me banking on rolling hot or my opponent rolling poorly. Focus on your movement phase, plan out everything, do everything well, and you will see results almost instantaneous.
I think that's some really good advice, and I think that's also I think Tau probably are the most impactful for the movement phase as well, more than any other faction. So I think he's bang on there. But I think that's advice that everyone can take in general. I'm a very, very much an advocate that movement phase is the most important part of the game by far. That's what allows you to do so many different things. So yeah, spot on. I really agree. What about you, Damian?
I suppose well, a lot of people think of Dark Angels as a fairly slow army, which is where the Ravenwing thing I think catches people off. So that would be the biggest thing, is like the Terminators to an inexperienced player may seem like the biggest threat, but they're a bit of a distraction kind of effects in a way. And also there's only certain armies that will actually be able to get rid of them. So avoid them as much as you can, only engage them if you're going to win that combat, and otherwise try and sort of take out the mobility. The Talonmaster is clutch for the army, because by itself it can like wipe out units, and also is incredibly fast. So there were several games at Uprising where I got quite a big swing, because at the late end of the game, the Talonmaster is just going to run off by itself and take your backfield objective. So that like chaff unit that was hiding behind a wall that you thought was safe, well, if it's within 27 inches of my Talonmaster, it's at risk of like losing that objective. So those sort of things, I'd like, if you want to play against that style of army, try and deal with the Ravenwing stuff first, deny the scoring, and then try and clean up the Terminators if you can.
Makes sense, and I really like the idea of I think why I personally prefer the dual list instead of just 50 Terminators, which I think is just disgusting. The fact that you have that yin yang, you have the hypermobile things that can actually then make it to things, get angles, push back line, do what you need to do, and then you have the other things that are really durable, holding objectives, punishing the enemy if they do get too close. So I think that's a really good yin and yang, and I think that's why Dark Angels are in such a good spot. Obviously the points changes are really good, but secondaries are great, and also the gameplay and game sense and how they actually operate by running the dual kit is really what every faction really kind of wants. You want to be able to hold that point and be really unstoppable, and if anyone comes too close, they get attacked. But you also want to be hypermobile to be able to get those angles or push people off objectives that weak chaff units, like you said, are holding. For myself, my biggest tip, I think you guys have kind of covered it. Movement phase, I think, is key. Specifically to AdMech, obviously check out the 412 podcast. We've had so many people. We've even had Richard Siegler on there because I'm amazing. No, I'm joking. But that is, it talks a fair bit about AdMech. Nobody plays AdMech, so it doesn't really matter. This is mainly a moot point. But there are definitely ways that you can get value there, and it really just comes down to overall game sense. So understanding, my biggest tip is really understanding and asking the right questions for what your opponent can do. And once you understand that, then you can actually adapt and play. A perfect example, let's say we're talking about this, fabled 20 custodian warden list. You understand that there's a 25-inch threat range. You want to stay 25.5 inches away. Being able to actually negotiate that and agree with your opponent on that by measuring it out and sorting everything else out at the start is really important as well, because then it also prevents any issues down the end. I think that's why I have a lot of amicable games, because before I do any movement phase or anything like that, I will make sure that everything is actually negotiated and understood at the start of the command phase before I even do the actual command buffs. So I think, Tau players generally do that a lot. I've been, I've played reps into Jay, I've played reps into Cooper, played reps into William Wyckoff quite a bit, and they're really good at doing that as well. So yeah, props to that. Is there any sort of last comments that you guys might have?
I think you touched on a good one there, that like work on your communication skills. And this is agnostic of any single army. When I'm going through, I very rarely have a confused opponent. I very rarely have somebody go, "Oh man, that feels like a gotcha, you didn't," whatever. And I'm not giving up my game plan. I'm not telling them what I'm, about to do to them, in the next turn that's coming after they take theirs or whatever. And, outside of a couple of hedge cases that I'm not happy with, I'm not giving them something they shouldn't have. But when I communicate with somebody, I don't pick up dice unless I'm saying, okay, these guns on that unit, it's this many shots, they have this buffs on them, I'll be re-rolling these dice. And then I throw the dice. And I don't throw them until the person's actually looking at me. Or even if we're going quickly, I get some sort of acknowledgement. Like they're pulling models off the table. I'm like, hey, I'm going to roll these. And they're like, yeah, cool, go. And then I'll just throw them and I'll stand there and leave the dice until the person stands back up. There are so many issues that get solved when people just like actually chat to each other. Like, reinforcing that social contract.
Yeah, it's a two-player game, and I've said this before in my group chat. The game is a negotiation. That's what it is, and then dice is secondary. You want to talk about things. You want to agree that if this happens, then I'll be within range to do X, Y, Z. If this happens, this is how much dice will actually be coming through you. Do you understand that? Yes, I do. Do you want to react to that? No, I don't. Hey, if you charge me here, just to let you know, in this area specifically, here is a fight last. Do you understand that? Yes, no, cool. Like understanding that and negotiating so everyone actually understands it, is really important. It allows you to have better games because then you start winning games not through gotchas. You start winning games because you've generally outplayed and thought of really amazing tactics, which I think is something that we all really love to do. That's a lot more rewarding. And even if you lose that game, then you know that there's areas where you might be able to improve or do something differently. But it also means that at the end of that, this game is a hobby. It's a community-based game. You need to actually make sure that you're having people in the community, respect you, admire you, want to play with you again. And you definitely don't want to be that person where, you don't want to be, approached or people have a bad experience with. So yeah, that's it for me. This is my hobby. I love it. If I was having bad experiences, I would stop playing the game. So I try to make sure, and I have compulsion to be liked. So I kind of, maybe explain too much at times, but it's a blast. That's why
when it starts affecting your win rate, I think then you can call it a problem. Until then, 100-0ing every opponent. 100-0ing every opponent's probably it's not a problem yet.
It's a bit wild, AdMech, because it has so much weird synergy and buffs that you can just go, hey, this happens this turn. And just so you know, I'm going to do these two buffs next turn. And because of where I am, I have agency on XYZ on the board. And there's no way for you to interact with this part right now. You can feel free to try. But if you do that, I feel you're going to be misplaying because there's this here as well that you need to deal with. That makes it really weird because you can do that. And if you really forward think your turns and work it out, it's absolutely bonkers. And I really hope that we don't get another buff. I'm actively trying to make sure we don't get another buff, but we keep seeming to drop the win rate. We got another 28% win rate this weekend, 32% last weekend, including the GT win. So, if anyone wants to buy an AdMech army,
I think props to you though for playing. Like AdMech, I think is the kind of faction where if you didn't play it in that kind of open style, like you could very easily run rings around people because it's so complex and there's so many multi-layered buffs and different rules. And it has a lot of potential to be a really bad experience for your opponent. And I don't think that benefits anyone to that. Like, I mean, you might win a few games, but we play Warhammer because it's a social thing to do, because we want to get together and like have fun, like moving toy soldiers around the dice and sort of like throwing dice, right? We're not just going there just to sort of like beat the crap out of people. Like we want to do that in a fair way. So
in a fair way, right? You want to earn the victory. Yeah. I mean, look, Jay can attest that when we played our game, I think I actually put dice down for my next turn. This is my threat range for where I can move. This is your turn now. You have the ability to adapt to that and actually counter that.
And that was the thing.
I think I go a bit too much, but yeah.
I mean, Maybe, but not really, because I've always found that when I have beaten somebody, and this is something that, having a little bit of self-awareness out of my faction, and I alpha strike somebody, and I know at that point that the game is over. I let them know all the things that I could do. I let them know about my redeploys, how fast my stuff could move, the stratagems I have, all that sort of thing. At the end of our game, even though it was the worst loss I've ever taken in my life, because it was a result of tactical decisions that I made or things that I didn't do when I had all the information, there was nothing really for me to feel bad about except for the things that I would like to do differently. It's when I've gone against people that I know have won because they purposefully withheld something until it was too late for me to do it. That feels like, okay, if I had all the information, I might have made different decisions. Therefore, the game goes differently. If somebody goes, no, you know what? You told me that you had it. I made a tactical decision. I made a gamble. I made whatever else. I felt like I had to. That's a decision I can stand behind, and it just didn't go my way. You very rarely have somebody that rebels against that unless they were predisposed to do it in the first place. And at the end of the day, because we're playing competitively, somebody has to win, somebody has to lose. And there are very few people I've found enjoy consistently losing. But if it's happening with fairness and a bit of integrity and some sportsmanship, which is something that I really hope keeps getting bumped up within the competitive sphere, then it feels the same as walking off a rugby field. You got beaten, you know that you played hard, but whatever, you go and have a beer, you have a laugh, you have whatever. And it's not something that, ruffles your feathers in the same way as playing against somebody who's pulling out every dirty trick that they can. So I actually fully stand behind the way that you did all of your stuff with laying out dice, visual representations, walking me through all the stuff that I needed to know as your opponent, because you didn't give up a game plan. You just said, I can do these things, not I will.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, sometimes I've said I will. So maybe I have to work on that. I've got to watch out. I did that in the final game in Dice. I said, I'm doing this next turn, just so you know. But there was no other choice. Look, some shout outs on the comments really quickly. We had one person actually mention, it's really good advice for any army, what you were saying, Jay. Movement phase is the most important thing. So definitely agree there. Apparently, why buy Kroot when you can just kit bash them? No, Kroot are the best model in the game. Why would you do that? I wholeheartedly disagree there.
And actually, on that point, I don't know who the Jay is that he tagged. That's not me. We have another lurker Jay.
Perfect. I'm happy with
Excellent.
that. Get an extra J. That's and then also the best GTs are when you walk away with 5 new friends. So I think that's really good, unless it's a 6-person GT, because then that means you made 1 enemy. So a 6 round GT. Sorry. But that's it. Any other comments, guys? Or we happy to send off?
No, I'm good.
Awesome. Oh, here we go. Chicken Tower, so old school. Does the Min Tower look better? Maybe the new Seraphon models, they are looking amazing. So, but the old ones, I mean, unless it's skinks, probably not too much. But the guys, really appreciate this. We're going to be doing more of these things through the 40K Academy. So please chuck us a follow on the Discord when you get a chance. We'll be doing some other videos as well where we get top 10 tips for each faction through top ITC faction specialists that will be coming through. And there'll also be some strategic ploy-based videos where we can throw the actual game on the board and certain tactics that you can do to really maximize your results. So appreciate it. Any comments, any feedback, please let us know. But thank you, Damian. Thank you, Jay, for being a part of this. And hopefully you guys got some value out of it as much as the viewers.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's been great.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you later and have a great night.
Bye, everybody.